Just what I want to do today on Mr. Chippy's bench while he's not here is to unbox this power supply. We've been talking about the power supplies we have on the benches, and because we're going to be setting up another bench as soon as I can, probably around June, for doing selectivity tests, in other words bleed over, I needed a power supply for that bench. Now you'll be aware that some of the radios we work on are 12 volts and not 13.8. And so we use power supplies which are programmable, if I can get it out of the box. So I just ordered this extra one and I thought I'd show you, instead of faffing around and taking one off one of the benches. Now I particularly want power supplies which are an LED readout rather than liquid crystal. It's a light emitting diode, because it's easy for me to see at a glance and not on an angle. And this particular type is available with an LED display, hence that's the type I've ordered. So these are a 3 amp power supply, and we do, nearly everything we do is less than 3 amps. So the CB radios we work on are normally around about 1.2 amps, and obviously we do business radio, and we have an 18 amp power supply on one bench. Most business radios are going to be in the 5 to 7 amp type of power requirement, but just because you see some of the radios you're going to have a 45 watt capability, and although in the UK it's 25 watts maximum on business radios, sometimes the tune-up method requires you to put them up to full power. Some of those can be 65 or 45 or even 65 watts. So we do need to have a power supply, and we just have one 18 amp power supply for those kind of needs. But for most of the stuff, it's going to be 3 amps and less. So these are programmable. I'll pause the video and I'll go and find a mains lead, which I didn't think was missing. So I've decided to open this up. I've never even looked in one of these. One of the reasons we buy these is because they are transformer operated, traditional, not switch mode. I'm not a switch mode lover, there's no particular reason for that, except probably my age. So we've got a nice, considering this is a 3 amp power supply, you know, that transformer is nice and hefty. We've got the actual power supply works on a fiberglass printed circuit board mounted on a heatsink with a thermostatic fan. So that fan's only going to come in and out as needed. In fact, I've never heard the fan come on one of these because we rarely draw, as I say, more than 1.2 amps. Just a couple of relays in there, and then it goes to the control electronics onto the front panel. Now I do have to look at one of our other power supplies at some point in the not too distant future, because the display has gone intermittent. So probably won't be doing a video on that because it's probably some dry joint resistor. So there's 2 boards there. I mean, the whole thing's fiberglass construction. And do you know what? I think there's something like £65 plus VAT trade. You know, it's not a huge amount of money. I couldn't make one for anywhere near. So now we know what's inside. I'll put the lid back on. Right, so we'll switch this on. And we are on memory 1, which I've set these as we have them. So memory 1, I have to 12.8 volts with a current limit of 1.5 amps. And that's when we're going to be doing those 40 channel walkie-talkies like the Realistic or some of those Porter Pack sets. So memory 2, when I get a set on the bench, it's 13.8 volts at 0.35 of an amp. So if I don't know what the set, where it's come from, the initial test is at 13.8 volts at 0.35, so it's just over a third of an amp. So the slightest malfunction, this is going to shut down. And then for the normal tune-up, when we're going to transmit, I use the memory 3, which is I've set for 13.8 volts at 2.5 amps. So remember, it's a 3 amp power supply. It's going to current limit at 2.5 amps. We've also got over current protection, over voltage protection, which we can switch on and off accordingly. In case we're scared that someone's going to adjust the things, we can also lock the power supply. So these will then have no effect. Unlock it. Then finally, my memory 4 is for doing 24 volt sets, like when we get smoke coming out of them. If you remember the particular one I'm thinking of. Well, I've got this on this bench because I'm going to do some 24 volt droppers, which have been passed on to me by one of the customers for me to repair and keep. So that's what I'm going to be looking at, and that's what we're going to look at today. Now, if we need to do more current than 3 amps at 24 volts, then we'll bring one of those emergency booster batteries in, which I have in my van. I've got a 24 volt jump start battery. We'll use that. So that's why we use these, and that's why I can play around a little bit, because I'm confident that the slightest thing that happens, these power supplies will shut down. Because when I'm doing those tune-ups, they're nearly always, unless it's the transmitter, everything else we do is at 350 milliamps. So there you are. And, oh, by the way, you switch these on and off like so. So you're going to be showing the current draw, which is great. So now we'll dive into the job which we've got in hand. Right, so we've got the power supply set up. We want memory force. We're on 24 volts, 3 amp maximum, and we've got a Jesan 24 to 12 volt reducer. It's supposed to be 10 amp capability, but we can only test up to 3 amps with this. As I said, if we need more than that, well, we can move on to using the battery which we keep in the van. So let's see. I'll use the multimeter first, and then we'll switch to the electronic load. So we'll switch on. So we now have an output. And we've got 14.5 volts coming out of it. So let's see what it is on load. So move that out of the way. I need some crocodile lead kind of things. Okay, so we've now got the dropper connected to the electronic load here, and I've got it set for 2 amps. So as soon as I press the enter button, or on the on and off button, this will draw 2 amps. So I'd like to know at what point this does become 13.8 volts. That's not too high. It's about where a lot of cars charge, so that isn't scary. So let's just see. We'll let's adjust it. And that's 3 amps, which is our current power supply starting to current limit. So we'll drop that to 2.9. So various fans have now kicked in, as you'll well imagine. this isn't even going over ambient temperature. So that proves that this is absolutely working fine. So we've got another one to test, so we'll pause the video. So this looks to be exactly the same but new in the box. Oh, this one's got an instruction leaflet. We always bought the Les Wallin ones, to be honest. Got one or two of those in a box for when we do need them. Yeah, so that's what you need 10 amp one on a business radio rather than a 3 amp one for a CB, as for the reasons I said. They're not isolated, so if something dropped across those, they're going to be at high voltage potential. So I noticed on the other one there was a piece of a double-sided stuff which was stuck across them, which probably was a good idea. But that does have to be, they are going to be at 24 volts and this is going to be at 0, so it's just something to watch. So this one has had leads and things connected to it, which is interesting. So the input on this one, they are blue and black. Don't suit our terminals, so we'll just cut those off. So the fact this is put back in a box, does it mean it's faulty? So we're going to find out. So I'll get this connected to the equipment. Right, so we've got this one connected up now, if I can get it on camera shot. Not that you're going to see it do anything. So we'll switch the power on to it. And at no current we've got 14.8 coming out of it. I don't really like them to be more than 14.4, 14.5 off as a minimum current draw. So we'll just see at what point. I'll just drop that down to I'll tell you what, we'll drop that down to 300 milliamps, which in reality would be the lowest you're ever going to see with a CB radio connected. So we'll switch on 14.5. It's not going to blow anything up, but it's not ideal. So 1 amp 14.2, 2 amps 14.1, take it to 2.98 amps, 14 dead. So again, it works exactly the same as the other one. So I'm just going to now experiment with the current draw at the low end. So at 300 milliamps. If you look at the top display, it's 304 milliamps. So this is taking 4 milliamps, isn't it? Which is pretty good going. So I'm going to increase this 14.5 volts, 14.5 volts, 14.5 volts, 14.5 volts, and I'll get to 14.4 at 800 milliamps. So by the time you hit transmit, it's going to be well under the scary bit. So at 900 milliamps, let's go to a 1 amp, 14.4. Oh, this is a Moonraker branded one. It's exactly the same unit, but branded Moonraker. Interesting, I want the same factory. So the Jesan one actually belongs in the Jesan box. So we'll be able to do that. We can do that right now. We sent a whole pile of realistic 1001 handhelds once, twice, 3 times, onto one of these countries' mercy missions where the UK was sending aid to a country who were war-torn, and it was one of our little, done as a freebie. And of course the lorries were all 24 volts, so we had to make sure we had droppers for those, apart from one lorry where they managed to plug it in without the dropper and blow up the radio. But anyway, there we go. So we've tested those, they all work. Conversely, we could put the light bulb test on instead, or as well as. So I'll take this electronic load off, and instead of the electronic load we'll get the 21 watt light bulb. So one connection, where's the other? And there we have it, lighting a light bulb instead, and that's drawing 1.9 amps. There we have it. So 24 volt droppers, we haven't had to actually work on them. And let's have a look inside while we're doing the video. I'll turn these power supplies, I'll turn the output off, and we'll turn that one off. And let's just open this up. So I've got a MUA 7815 voltage regulator. They'll have raised the earth to produce less than 13.8 volts. What you can do. There's a couple of 3 watt resistors. There's some electrolytic capacitors there to smooth it. So pretty similar to the way the Wallen ones work. And then the output of that is amplified by the 2N3055 transistors, which I noted are branded RCA, so they are good quality. So I've no reason to believe these don't work reliably for donkeys of years, and both these we've tested today work absolutely fine. It's not something we often see. I say I've got some in a box which we used on those Mercy missions, but it's very rare that I've actually used one. I think we had to put a CB in a coach once for a firm at Arnold in Nottingham, and we used one there. So that's it, 24 volt droppers. So we demonstrated the power supplies we use. Because these have a 24 volt capability, we can test things other than 12 volt things. The way we have these set up with the different memories, we've got the 12.8 volts, 13.8 at a low current, 13.8 at 2.5 amps, and then we've got 24 volts at 3 amps. So I hope you found that slightly interesting, and the electronic load which we've shown several times before. Thanks for watching.